Hello, welcome back to I Got Board
Got
Game.
board game.
I got board game.
Board game.
I'm Ben,
John.
and today we are here with a review of a small card game. Came out several years ago. A game that's basically an abstract card game, but with some very unique central rules. And that game is
Cowboy game. Magnificent Seven.
Magnificent Seven. They fought like 700.
Yep, that's right. And this is the old version, not the new one with Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
Brenner.
And Chris Pratt.
Yeah, and Chris Pratt. But go watch the old one. That one was really good. I had to watch it for my film class. Anyway.
Anyway, that had nothing to do with the game.
Red7.
Red7. This small box game, really slim, small, portable. So Red7 is a game by Asmodi Games, and it came out in 2014, I believe, and plays 2 to 4 players. Box says 5 to 10 minutes. Maybe if you're playing with kids who aren't thinking too much about the game, I'd say definitely more like 15 minutes is solid. If you're playing with like 3 or 4 players. And so to give you a brief idea of how the game plays, not to get into any of the smaller rules because those can get a little confusing unless you're actually playing the game. But we'll switch over now to give you a brief idea of how the game plays. And so I couldn't find a picture of the game set up on Board Game Geek at least before doing this.
That's basically a setup.
And so, as you can see here, there's the rule book, and you have reference cards, and then the other side of the reference card, and the deck of cards. But essentially, Red7, as I mentioned, is an abstract game. In looking through the rules just before this, back of the box, there actually is, I think, no explanation of any theme to it. It just starts talking about winning the game and how the game is played. And so the way this game works, though, is you have a deck of 49 cards. You have 7 cards in each of the 7 colors of the rainbow, which are also on the reference card here on the right. And so you have 7 red cards, 7 orange cards, 7 yellow, and so on, making the whole deck. And each one of those colored cards is also numbered 1 through 7. So you have a 1 red, a 2 red, 3 red, so on to an orange 1, orange 2, so on. So 1 through 7 of each of the 7 colors. And so the whole point of the game is to play your cards so that you're the last one standing after however many rounds it takes. And basically, to be in the game, to stay in the game, you always have to be winning at the end of your turn. And that's kind of like the simple way the rules explain how to play the game. And that's actually I really enjoy getting to explain the game that way. But to explain how that actually works is to set up the game, you're going to deal out 7 cards to each player. And then, you're going to shuffle the deck, deal out 7 cards. You're going to put this red discard card marker in the center. And then you're also going to deal 1 card face up in front of each player. And so the terms the game uses for in front of the player is called their palette. And then this center card, this discard area, is called the canvas. I'll just say the center or in front of each player to keep it simple. But the way it works is each color, as you can see on the reference card, has a certain rule to determine who is winning at any given point. And so red is the default rule because this card in the center is always going to start with this red one. And the red rule to be winning is the highest card wins, meaning if you have the highest numbered card in front of you, you are winning the game. And so then each color has their own rule, but then each card that you have in each of these colors is also going to say the rule on it. So it's easy to kind of look at your reference card or even look at the cards themselves to remind yourself of what the rule for each color is. But then on your turn, as you can see with this reference card, you basically take 1 action, but you have 3 possible choices. One is you can play a card in front of you. So you play it face up in front of you. And then when you do that 1 action, the card you play has to make it so that you're winning, depending on whatever the rule is in the center. So if it's saying if the rule is actually red, you need to have the highest card in front of you compared to other players by the end of your turn to stay in the game, to be winning the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so if everyone else, if there's two other players, you know, their first card in front of them is a 5, another player's is a 4, and yours is a 1, but you can play a 6 in front of you, then you can just play that 6 in front of you, and then you'll be winning. Then it goes to the next player's turn. And then on their turn, they need to play a card to be winning at the end of their turn to stay in the game. The other action you can do is instead of playing a card in front of you, you can play a card, or it says discard, but it's essentially playing a card to the center, and you'll basically cover up the center card, changing the rule.
Mm-hmm.
So you might play an orange card to the center, and then the rule becomes having the most of one number wins,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so then you need to make sure that when you change the rule, you do have the most of a single number in front of you compared to other players to be winning. And then the third action you can take is actually you can play 2 cards. You can play one in front of you and one in the center to change the rule. And then after doing that, you have to be winning the game based on what that new rule is. And then the fourth action it says here is just pass, do nothing, and lose. But that's not really an option. It's just if you actually can't come on top and win win the game at that end of your turn, then you just lose and you're out.
Mm-hmm.
And so this will go around until you're the last one standing, or one player is the last one standing, because no one else can win at the end of their turn based on the rule in the middle. And then that person is the winner. And so then there are also other advanced rules for the game, like little rules to add in, such as a way to draw cards from the deck, or even all the odd cards have their own ability when you play them in front of you.
I
And
think we've
so
played with
those are
that rule
ways to
before.
also
I think we've played with that rule before.
yeah,
right?
we played with that after we've kind of played this base version that I've been describing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then we'll probably go into those abilities on the odd number cards during our review to maybe point out if that's actually an interesting variant or an interesting way to make the game more advanced feeling or not.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that is essentially the game. There are small rules for breaking ties, which do happen quite often.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if the rule is saying who has the highest card is winning, and and you have a 6 in front of you and another player has a 6 in front of them, then you compare color, where then on the reference card you can see there is this color order, which is the rainbow order. And so if I have the red 7 but you have the yellow 7, then my card is actually higher than yours still, and then I am winning.
Yeah, the
And
way you
so
can think about it, like in a normal card deck of cards, is like suits, right? In most games, there's suit strengths in them. So like a typical deck of cards, right, with spades, hearts, clubs, and diamonds, right? That's typically the order of strength to them. It's the same idea in this game too, which is colors of the rainbow, right? Starting with red being typically the strongest, and violet being the weakest in terms of the color palette for the game.
And then that's why this game is called Red 7. The Red 7 is the strongest card in the game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so there will be other scenarios too, like if you're comparing for another rule, like who has the most of one color wins, right? If both of you have 2 green cards, and you were thinking you were going to win with that on that rule, then you would compare who has the higher numbered card first. Then that person's actually winning the rule. So those are all just kind of small tiebreaker rules that come out while you're playing the game, knowing to compare numbers first and then compare color ranking. And that's how you kind of resolve ties. But yeah, that's essentially how the game plays. So let's go into our thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Starting with John, your pros for this game.
Yeah, overall, I think it's a really fun game. It's very short, right? So this is definitely not a heavy game in the sense of like lots of things, like lots of rules or lots of things going on. It's very simple of like, there's one rule going on and you've got to play some cards to be winning at the end, whether it's one card in front of you, one card to change the rule, or a card to change the rule and a card in front of you to make sure that you can play, basically, right? So very simple. You only have effectively 3 real actions to take a turn. And then as the base game, right, to just play where you only have the set of cards in your hand keeps it very simple. There's no worries about like, oh, like I keep drawing cards to continue playing in the game, although we just talked about there being a variant for it. The base game, as it is, just a very simple, you play through the game. So that being said, you would, I think one of the really strong, cool things about this game is the fact that there are 7 distinct rules for how to be winning. And I think that really puts the variance in this game. And this also sets it apart from like being just like a deck of cards type of game where it's like, oh, couldn't I just play this game if I had like a standard 52 card deck of cards to play, right? Because it's just numbers 1 through 7. So couldn't I just grab a deck? Well, you can't because there's 7 different colors and there's 7 numbers to them. So it's actually a 49 card deck, right? If you think about it that way. And it's 7 effective suits that are kind of running at the same time within the game. So it already kind of sets itself apart there. And the cool factor about the sense of always needing to be winning at the end of the round. And it's not to say that you need to be winning after your round, because obviously new cards are going to be played and everyone has to follow that rule. But that's a really fun thing where it's like the way that you play the game is not by a single rule that kind of stays consistent throughout the entire round, right? It's you have to play cards that let you be winning at the end of your turn, right? And then you also in that sense are both making sure that you stay in the game, but there's also an element of you could be affecting other players by changing the rules on them or by staying consistent with the current rule that's out, right? So I think that from a strategic standpoint, it's definitely a very different way of playing these kinds of games where oftentimes it's only one rule, like if you're playing cards like, I don't know, like Crazy Eights or some other like card games that you play where there's always certain rules that kind of always stay the same in the game.
Yeah, I think my biggest pro for this game is the simplicity of it. Like I mentioned during the rules, like I love being able to teach this game of just saying, just you'll have to be winning at the end of your turn, and then everyone's initial reaction like, what does that mean? And then once you explain the rest of the rules, it makes a lot of sense, right? It's like you just have to be winning at the end of your turn. Like you say it again later, and it's like, I get it. Because it's just there's always just that one rule happening at a time, and then in that case, I think that's the way the game is also on another point pretty easy to get into, right? Kind of what you're getting at, that it's not like a lot of things to keep track of, right? And in that way, it's also not a very heavy strategy game. Like I think it's very light, if any strategy at all, right? But mostly a tactical game where it's just when it gets to your turn, you have to figure out one way to get by and win. It's not necessarily, I mean, you could try to plan ahead, but it's not necessarily like, oh yeah, I'm setting up this great plan so that I know when it comes back to me, I'm going to be able to like do this, right? It's just more like I need to get by right now, and that's all that matters. I just need to win for now. Then it'll go to your turn, then you got to deal with it and try to win, but I don't need to worry about it then, right? And so I think that's kind of what the simplicity is really appealing. And then also I think what makes it easy for people to get into. Yeah. I think another thing is also like, even though it's abstract, which for me is kind of a hit against it just because I like theme in games, and it didn't really do anything with the theme except a few terms here or there randomly, like the palette and the canvas, which doesn't really mean much.
It doesn't, yeah.
But I think it still has that kind of charm because it involves these colors as the suits, right? And so it's something that people can initially understand pretty quickly, I would say, right? Like, oh, like the color order is how you compare the strength of the colors of the cards, right? Like a red card is higher than an orange card, and we know that from like the rainbow, right? And so, and then a 7 is obviously higher number than a 6. So you just kind of have these simple concepts that are intuitive in the game, and kind of then bringing them together to make it about this game where you have to keep making sure you're winning at the end of your turn. So I think that was really clever about it.
Mhm. Yeah, and kind of getting back to the simplicity of the rules, I think that's the other thing that's really nice is like it's not a game where rules kind of compound on themselves. So there's a similar game where rules and kind of affecting and changing rules happens a lot, which is Flux, right? Is another smaller game, right, that you can play with larger, or like with groups of people. Where in that particular game, like the end game or the winning scenario can change, right? And the whole thing in that game is that that's happening. In this game, it's kind of a similar concept of like needing to fulfill like a changing win condition, but it's more of, as we've talked about, it's you need to change or you need to be fulfilling the win condition to ensure that you stay in the game, right? In this circumstance is that you need to be the leader in that winning condition, right? And but then it's not like there's like three or four different conditions that are happening at the same time in this game. It's just one condition that either is currently out or you change it to be what you want, right? And that's really nice too, because then, as you're saying, right, it's very simple and just like there's not a lot for me to do. I just got to do it, right? And just make sure that I have it. And then if I can't, then crap, I'm screwed and I'm out for the round, right? So,
Yeah, and that's also kind of what makes the game quick, right? Which is a
mhm,
plus about it, where it's not a game that, there's certain other genres of games like social deduction, which can come across the issue of player elimination, is what it's called, right? That someone can get eliminated, kicked out, lose in the game, and so they're out for the rest of the game. But the game is like pretty quick, right? So you
mhm.
don't need to worry or rack your head too much on like, oh, what is everything I can do with my hand of cards because I really need to stay in. It's like, no, it's like, okay, I can't figure out how to keep winning at this point, so I'm just out. So you guys finish the game and then we can play
I
again.
have one card. I need to figure it out.
And then I think getting into those rules, right, about like the actual colors rules, right? Red being like highest card wins, orange being what most of, was
One
it
number, right?
most
Or
of one
most of a
number
number,
wins, yellow
right?
being most of one color wins, green being most even cards wins. I think those are just fun to kind of then think about though while you're playing,
Yeah.
right? Like that kind of puzzle aspect of it, which is like, and again, we've been describing this small puzzle where it's like you just need to get by, right? You don't need to think of elaborate comboing or anything,
Mhm,
but still just that puzzle that you are dealing with versus it's different for someone else depending on their hand, right? I
mhm.
think that is the fun part of the game, right? That you have these, like you start with 7 cards, right? So you have these possibly 7 different rules you can change it to, maybe more like 3 or 4 different rules, right? If you have duplicate of certain colors.
Color, right?
And then you have to then kind of think of those rules in combination with the numbers on the cards, and it leads to that kind of moment where, oh, am I willing to sacrifice this higher number because I want the rule to be this?
Yeah.
Will that actually be a safer way for me to move
Mhm,
forward and win for now and not give up, maybe some other cards I have? And so that's kind of the interesting decision point of the game that comes around every turn,
mhm.
right? You're always going to be making that decision of, yeah, do I just change the rule? Will I win like this? Sure. Or should I just play this and keep the rule the same and win like
I'm
this?
still winning, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
And I
that,
think that's also kind of the cool part where you have kind of these three different options of doing it, right? You can either add a new number to your palette, which, or yeah, palette, right?
yeah, yeah.
Or like in front of you, right? Like you add it to your own kind of area, which means like by if you play a number there, that means you have that number, right? And that color in front of you. And as we were saying, there's a few different kind of number or like there's different conditions that you can win. So there's kind of a positive in having a lot of cards in front of you, right? But then there's also the thing of like, well, maybe you don't have the opportunity to play the number in front of you, but I can change the rule and I'm only using one card to change the rule. So I can still be winning. And yeah, I changed the rule, but and I lost that number, but at least like I'm still in the game. And then there's also the third option where it's like, crap, I don't have any option, but I guess I could use 2 cards if I have like to stay in. And it's not ideal, but at least I'm getting a number in front of me and I'm playing a card, right? To make sure that I stay in the game.
Mhm.
Though it does take more cards, right? And as we said, like in the base game, you can't redraw cards, but this way at least you're still in the game. And who knows, maybe you just set yourself up for the future where now you don't have to change things as much, right? To ensure that you're, winning.
Mhm,
And I
mhm.
think that's also the really cool thing about the game. It's like it always requires you to be playing a card because of the nature of the rule that the person you must be winning by the end of your turn, which means whoever's the next player will have to play a card, right? In some way. It's kind of this way that they put it kind of like cleverly into the rules that you're always required to play cards, right? Because the nature of the game is, you have to be winning, which means the other player must do something to be winning the next round. So that's really cool too, from a
Yeah, that
thematic,
does give
from
it.
a gameplay standpoint.
Yeah, yeah, it does give it that direction that
Mhm.
it's gonna have to keep going this way.
Yeah.
And then I was gonna actually add on to what you were pointing out about those kind of situations that come up, those decision points on your turn, where then you might play a card that can set yourself up in two different ways. Like maybe you'll play a six in front of you to if it allows you to win at the end of your turn, but then you also know it counts as a high card,
Mhm.
counts as an even card, right? And
Mhm.
I think that the important thing to know when if you guys are imagining how this game is playing is that aspect that the cards you're playing in front of you stay in front of you, so it is building up,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, so if I play a six now, I have a six there, and it'll count as a high card later if someone wants to try to
Mhm.
win that way. It'll count as an even card later if someone wants to try to have more even cards than me.
Mhm.
But then you're also aware, oh, there is a rule that's like whoever has the most cards under, was it three
A
or four?
certain number. Yeah, like four, I
Yeah,
think.
under four. Yeah, and then it's like, ooh, then like if someone else has that and changes that, then the six will kind of
Doesn't
be
do
lost at
anything
that
at
point.
that point. Yeah.
But then if I can change it to high card wins again with a red card, then I might be on top. So there's that interesting aspect of those decisions and knowing that it is building up in front of you. So you are kind of maybe doing that's the part where you can do a little bit of planning, I would say, a little bit of
Mhm. Mhm.
strategizing of setting yourself up.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so I think the last thing I would have as a pro is just uh like the production I showed you is a really simple box. And the art's all right. It's just these colors, right? And I think that might have been what made it stick out to me a bit when I first saw this at a game store. I remember when I saw it and got it, I was like looking for a new small game to try out. And then this one I saw like it seems very like abstract, but like maybe that would mean it is more interesting in kind of like the way it's a puzzle and you have to think it through. And so that's when I decided to give it a try. Also, since it is a Golden Geek nominee back in 2014, they're like, okay, community seemed to maybe catch on to it in a certain way.
Mhm.
But then I guess aside from the production and the art of it, I do want to also just show a picture of the cards because I
Mhm.
think even just the cards are very simple, but are the colors like it's just
Yeah.
all visually this kind of colorful, simple, uh, to understand look to it, which I think is very helpful and makes it even slightly more appealing than like games you would play with poker cards, right? Because those are obviously suits, but then you people are familiar with the suits, but you're still kind of looking for that suit icon and then the
Yeah.
number of them. Where
Mhm.
this is like very clear, right? Like the color is there, the number is right there,
Yeah.
And so though I guess I mean I would say one thing when we get to our cons on this, but as a pro, yeah, it's just a small pro. This production, the look to it, very simple, clean, easy to understand
Mhm.
for this kind of abstract game with these kind of
Did
rules.
we want to mention the odd
Oh yeah,
rules
yeah, yeah.
one
So, oh yeah, yeah.
before we
Sorry,
switch
that was
over?
that was
Just real
another.
quick.
At least for me, it's a small pro. I don't know if it's bigger
Yeah.
for you because I know when we play the game in the base way that we just described during the rules of dealing out the seven cards, do your one action on your turn, make sure you're winning, keep going till your last person standing. That way of playing, either will lead to everyone else getting eliminated because they can't follow the rules, or
Yeah.
people being eliminated because they ran out of cards. You
Yeah.
know, and so then I mentioned that there are these advanced rules of, you get to, I think, draw a card when you play a number to the center and it's a higher number than the number of cards you have in front of you, then you get to draw a card. I've actually never played that way. But then we also mentioned the odd cards, 1, 3, 5, 7, all have their own powers too, which then are also, you're given a reminder on the cards themselves. The symbols in the top corner
Mhm.
are supposed to be representative of what the power is, and it's always the same. Like all threes have the same powers, all
All
fives
sevens, all
have the
fives,
same.
all
Yeah,
ones.
so it's not that hard. You just learn the 4 of those powers, and then it kind of gives a game. It definitely mixes up the game a bit.
Mhm.
Like for example, I have the rules right now where like the 7 is when you play, basically it's when you play one of these odd cards on your turn, you do the power.
Mhm.
And so like the 7 is choose a card from your palette in front of you and either discard it to the canvas or like make it the new rule,
Mhm.
or place it face down on the draw deck.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's that's interesting. I mean, it like all of these rules I think are interesting. I don't know if it necessarily makes it feel like powerful, make
Mhm.
you feel powerful that you're doing it, but it is something that mixes the game up more.
Mhm.
And so yeah, like for example with the 7, right, you're basically playing a card and then using a card you've already played to change the rule,
Mhm.
and you have to be winning of course afterward. But that is kind of just interesting because it seems to be similar to your regular action of playing a card and then changing the rule, but you're only doing it with by playing 1 card versus 2, which is better.
Which is a lot better.
Yeah, but it also then depends if you actually want to play a 7 at that point in front of you.
Yeah. And it's also whether you want to change the rule to that particular type.
Mhm.
And you can put it on top of the deck, but it's also like, do you even have a card that would be good to do that? Right.
Yeah, I guess the powerful one from what I remember, the one that actually
I think
might
the
feel
three
powerful,
was.
yeah, is a 3, which is basically when you play a 3, you get to draw a card. And
Yeah.
so that's like the normal way you would be able to draw a card in this game without the other rule I had mentioned. So
Mhm.
that one is powerful, I would say. I guess it kind of comes down to the cases when you could play a 3,
Yeah.
because again, you have to be winning after you play the 3, right? And so kind of depends on what the rules are at the time.
Mhm.
And then the 5 is play another card from your hand to your palette. So you
So you get 2
can,
cards to play in front of you.
yeah, basically, yeah, let you play 2 cards in front of you, which is actually pretty helpful too, huh?
Mhm.
Because that's actually a card that can help you set up,
Yeah.
right, by getting a 1 card advantage in front of you that helps you satisfy more possible rules later.
And
So
as we mentioned, like even that setup, it could also prevent people from winning on a condition that maybe if you didn't play 2 cards, right, that they could have been winning, but by you playing that second card, you may be preventing them from winning that condition now. So like maybe you play a 5 and a 4, so then now you have the same amount of even cards that anyone else would have, so they
mhm,
wouldn't be able to, right, or something like that.
mhm,
Right?
mhm,
So you could do a lot of interesting things with that combo as well.
mhm,
So
mhm. And then the 1 is you choose a card from another player's palette in their area in front of them, and you can place it onto the return it to the draw deck. Um, yeah, I think, is that what it is? Yeah,
you blow up their
place it
card.
face down on
That's
the,
also really strong too.
yeah, and but you can't choose someone who has less cards or fewer cards than you in
Yeah,
there in front of
that's
them.
the only thing. Yeah.
But yeah, it is the way that you could, it's kind of the take that card in this game, right? Where
Mhm.
you can kind of hurt someone's setup.
Yeah.
Kind of I guess opposite direction of the 5 that we just discussed, right? Or
Yeah.
instead of building yourself up a little ahead with 2 cards on a turn, you're making someone have 1 less card. And so I
Mhm.
guess these do actually make you feel powerful. I might have said that wrong. Uh, yeah. So,
Well,
and
the
we
one
have
is only
played.
useful if they have more cards, right? Because if they don't have more cards when you play it, then that's
Yeah, and
right.
we have played with this, and I think my impression was that, like I said, my original thinking was that it didn't make you feel more powerful, uh, because I think it might be just it still depends on when you can play a 1, 3, 5, or 7,
Yeah.
right? I think it's not like in theory, just reading these abilities, I was like, oh dang, yeah, you would want to do that all the time. But again, you have to be winning at the end of your turn. So playing the
Exactly.
card to do the ability might not even be a legal move because
Yeah.
you're not winning after your
Yeah.
turn anyway. So that
Exactly.
might be the aspect that kind of is, in a sense, balancing it out.
Mhm.
from not making it just like this advanced mode of play that makes these odd cards just specifically more powerful. So
He
yeah,
has it
but I
against
think
even cards in this game.
but I do think it is a nice addition that they have in the game, because even if it's not making you feel more powerful, it is a way to make the game, in a sense, more thinky. You know,
Mhm.
once you kind of play through the base version, which ends in those ways I mentioned, right? Like everyone being eliminated because they can't follow the rule or win at the end of their turn, or they run out of cards, then you might want something new to mix it up a little bit. And so this is a simple way, adding basically 4 new rules for these odd cards to give it a little more life.
Mhm. Yep.
And so, yeah, and so with that, we'll move on to our cons.
Mhm.
So what are your initial cons for the game?
Yeah, so I would say one of the cons of the game is the kind of feels like snowball, and this is talking about base, not talking about with the advanced rules that we just kind of explained and talked about. But if you're just playing without any of these special rules or anything, is there can be cases in which per round you're kind of given a bad hand, and there's really nothing you can kind of do about it, right? We were just talking about it a little bit before, where there are circumstances sometimes where your hand, like you could be dealt a certain hand, and every other player that you're playing against is dealt similar or the same kind of cards, colors and stuff, just higher numbers than your version. And you're kind of stuck because it kind of ends up this feeling, you kind of end up with this feeling of like, I can't win because they're always like everyone has the better versions of the cards that I have, because it is a like there's 2 tiers of sequenced kind of strengths, right? You have number strength and then you have color strength. So you could just be dealt a hand of really low kind of numbers that don't really synergize very well. And then other people have like the same ones, but they're higher numbers. So even if they don't necessarily quite synergize, it's still like higher numbers, which means they win ties, for example, right? So they're always kind of in an advantage in that case. So, and as we said, right, like there's no new drawing cards, there's no mulliganing to like get new cards in some way. You're kind of just stuck with that, and it just kind of sucks. So,
Yeah, and I do yeah agree with that con. I would want to temper it so that it doesn't turn people off of saying like it's just completely chance in
yeah.
what you're handed, because again, you can be clever about, how you're changing the rules and stuff
Mhm,
to help
mhm.
you. But I think even if you see like kind of higher cards and lower cards being even in that way, like I can still change a rule to help with low cards, I can change the rule to help me win with high cards. There's still just that difference of high cards still break ties,
Yeah.
for rules. And then obviously higher colors break
Mhm.
rules. And so in that way, there's still that kind of advantage given to having higher colors or higher numbered cards,
Yeah.
which is by chance. So
Mhm.
so yeah, so I do agree with that con. And that is the feeling I get when we played the base game, just even like maybe 2-3 times.
Mhm.
Then it's like, okay, we really need to play with those special abilities on the odd cards, the advanced rules, so that we can at least have some kind of way to mix things around, or at least like draw cards to keep
Mhm.
going. Because along with the base version, which again is the good way to obviously learn how the game works and
Mhm.
how this simple rule of always be winning works.
Yeah.
But I think a con with it also is that when uh, when you're playing with just those base rules, you also realize that doing that third possible action of playing 2 cards
Yeah.
is like probably the thing you never want to
It's
do
a
if
death
you can
sentence.
help
Yep.
it. Like
Mhm.
maybe in a rare case that you can somehow think of how you're setting yourself up, but even again, that's hard because depending on other players' hands and how they're going to be winning at the end of their turn,
Yeah.
like having a 1 card deficit compared to everyone else is bad, because if you can win at the end of your turn, your opponent can win at the end of their turn, then the next player can win at the end of their turn, and it keeps going around, but you have one fewer card,
Mhm.
then you're going to be eliminated first because you're just going to run out of cards to play. And when it
Yeah.
comes to your turn and you don't have cards to play, well, then you can't be winning at the end of your turn. And so that's why you're eliminated. And so yeah, so the in that way, the base version and the action of playing those two cards, it just doesn't feel good
Mhm, mhm.
to have to do that at times to be winning.
Yeah. And like I think one thing to also temper the expectations in this game is like another thing to remember is this is not supposed to be an intensive like invested in winning this game and have bragging rights for winning this game this one time kind of game, right? Like this is a game that is meant to be played multiple times over the course of like, game sessions. Like it's not a one and done kind of game. It's a let's play like 5 or 6 rounds of this game kind of game, which is conceptually how it feels, right? It's almost like chicken is the wrong way of thinking about it, but like it's the sense of like you want to just keep being part of the circle over and over and over until
Mm,
you're kind of the last man standing in that, which is why the playing two cards really feels like a death sentence in most
mm.
in most circumstances, because it's just like, oh, I had to play two cards, which means I'm automatically down a card compared to everybody else, right? Because that's the other thing, everyone has the same set of resources, right? And it's just set as it is. You can't, well, without the extra rules, you can't add any, you can't like get more cards, you can't like get a free pass for that round because you played two cards that round or something, right? It's just like, well, you played two cards, so you better hope that your opponents have to play two cards, otherwise you're kind of out of luck, right? Kind of thing. So
But it is also, I mean, yeah, kind of to add to your how you're kind of how you were tempering it a little bit to the
mhm,
expectation. It's
mhm,
also, I mean, you could be surprised about again what other people have, right? Like there probably are games where I've had to play two cards on two turns, but
mhm,
then just depending on my opponent's cards, they might have had more, but maybe not the right ones to help them win.
yeah,
And so then I still won. It's like
yeah,
in those kind of moments, I think also, yeah, kind of balance the game feel out, where it's not just always stacked against you, but it has that chance to it. And so in that case, the chance we've been talking about is both a con because it can set you up badly, but then also, I mean, not as bad as it might seem because
yeah,
it can set up someone else badly, and you could be surprised that you won.
mhm,
I think uh, the only other real con I would say, again, is a small one that I've mentioned and is probably obvious, is that there's no theme to the game,
yeah,
and the rules don't even try at it.
mhm.
It just uses some of those terms, which I really don't know why. Aside from there's a paintbrush in the picture and there's these colors,
And it's a rainbow
using
color,
terms
yeah.
like palette and canvas, but really there's no theme to it in that I mean, I guess in a bigger game that might bother me more, because it's something I'm spending more time on and I want to be able to imagine what's happening, get invested. But since it's so small, quick, being abstract is not that big of a deal to me.
Mhm,
I would say, actually, sorry, now that I think of it, a slightly bigger con than that, though, are some of those rules that you have to get used to.
mhm,
Like one of the rules that I was mentioning to John before this was that the rules actually talk about each card or each rule that you're playing with as its own game. And
yeah,
so it's like, you have to win this game, but if someone changes the game to the orange game,
yeah,
you need to win that. And it's like that. I mean, if you guys have watched our IGBG explains on terminology and stuff, you can probably imagine why that bothers us to
yeah.
read
Mhm,
rules
mhm,
that are talking about each rules set as a game in itself, and you're changing the game, and so you need to win the game at the end of your turn. It's like it probably could have been clearer the way that we've been describing it, I would say.
exactly.
uh, and then, of course, and then the other rules to get used to are the tie-breaking rules of comparing numbers first and then color. Like that takes a little getting used to because you're kind of comparing like, maybe 3 or 4 cards a player has in front of them compared
To
to
somebody
another player's,
else's.
and it's like, okay, so we're both satisfying the rule, but then I guess I have, oh no, yeah, I guess I
I have
have
the
the
higher
higher
number, so I
number
win.
here, so
But
then
then it's like, wait, but it's by the most number. So is it by color first or is it by number first?
Yeah, yeah. So
Right?
it's just that kind of
Yeah.
verification that you have to get used to. I think it's written pretty clearly in the rules of just like you're always comparing number
Mhm.
first and then color, but you just have to kind of get used to that, and even just used to uh, comparing colors, comparing
Mhm.
the higher colors, which
Yeah.
is like I think a fun way to say it, but it also is kind of can be it's unusual word way to describe it, but that's
Yeah,
kind
if you're a colorist, right, it's basically saying like reds are the best and
of
violets are the
which
worst.
red is the best, as we
And
know.
if you remember a review, we were just talking about a different game that reds are the worst class, not the best
Red
class. So
rising, red will
so
rise.
clearly this game has it wrong because red is not the highest class. No. Gold is the highest class. No.
Uh,
Um,
oh, and
but I was
actually,
gonna
sorry,
say, oh
sorry. Last small thing is,
yeah,
it's not colorblind friendly.
yes,
Yeah, because I don't think any of the colors have associated icons with them on the cards, right? It's just the
it's the
colored
text. That would be the
shown
only
and then
thing
the
that you could
numbers.
use.
So
Yeah.
that could be a problem.
Yeah. It's like I think you could like read the text, but then you would have to read the text on your cards every single time,
That's
right?
true.
And the
That's true.
text isn't different. It's not like unique based on the colors, right? It's all standard text. So you literally have to read the sentence to make sure you remember which card you have
Mm,
for colorblind players. So that
that's true. So
is
at
kind of a
least
knock.
it's
Yeah.
not completely
Unplayable.
unplayable for
It's
colorblind.
just it would probably not be a fun experience. You'd be doing a lot of reading, right, to keep track of the cards, or unless you somehow like memorize the size of the font, like the size of the sentence font, and that becomes your distinguishment. But
Yeah,
again,
and then
it's
you can just
very,
quickly see like, oh yeah, this sentence I know this one's referring to green or
yeah.
whatever.
So it isn't ideal. And I mean, getting a little bit back on the theme too, and kind of the terminology. I think if the game had a little bit of a stronger theme, it probably could have helped with some like the terminology clarification or like the
Mm,
rules and stuff. Because if you have a stronger theme, then you can kind of tie these pieces to, right, maybe your rules or your expectations for the end game, or
mhm.
like it being rules versus it being its own game. It's like, yeah, it is a weird thing. And I'm usually not like, I mean, conceptually, I think the game really has cool mechanics, but I do think that like the theme of colors and palettes and like the paintbrush, like I actually only realized this is a paintbrush after I stuck this picture on here and I was like, oh, what's that? Oh, it's a paint. Oh, right. But we've played the game many times for like over the years. Never occurred to me that that was actually like the theme of the game itself. So and it's kind of like, yeah, it does kind of suck because I was just thinking about like, oh, if I had to theme this, I'm like, what if I called the game Rainbow, and then the middle card is the prism, right? And that by playing your number, it like the prism breaks it into that color, which is the winning rule, right? And then you have your palette in front of you to make sure you like it, the as the prism breaks out, your numbers are like the winning colors, right? I don't know, something like that, right? That'd still be weird. I don't know if that would work well, but like conceptually that maybe could feel better, right?
Mhm, mhm,
You
mhm.
know, something like that. Obviously, there would be a lot of problems with that because that's not how light works. But like that idea, it's like it feels pretty weak as a theme, and it's
Yeah.
almost like maybe they could have done more with it. But going back to the same point, it's like it is a light game. So they maybe didn't put that much into it because they're just like, I want to sell the game. I want to get this concept out there.
Yeah, it's like
So,
I just need these 7 different rules to be in a game and then the
and
number.
they need to be unique in a simple way. So colors. Woo,
Yeah.
right? So yeah.
But
Anyway.
okay, so yeah, so those are our cons. A number of small ones, I would say, like
Mhm, mhm.
several small ones, and then obviously the bigger one about the feel and kind of the deterministic feel of the base version of the game.
Yeah.
But okay, so then with that, we'll go on to our ratings, and John guesses the weight.
Wait. Cool. So overall, I think it's a good light game. It's a solid light game. I think it has lots of replayability. It's easy to learn. It's not hard to get into. It's something that you could literally crack open, and within 5 minutes of like explaining the rules, you could have people playing. It's
Hold on, don't
very
take your score yet. Let me change my score again.
cheater.
like
But
I
that
was
being said, I think while simple in concept, and I think there are some fun times that you can get playing the game, and I definitely think it's a good addition if you're looking for a light game to add into your collection. But I would say that my overall rating for the game is a 7. For me, haha, 7, red 7, 7, 7,
Yeah.
fanatic. Mainly because it's like, as I said, it's pretty solid. Like there really isn't like conceptually as a game, there's nothing wrong with it. It is fun. We got a lot of laughs and a lot of like groans of like, no, you beat me, in these circumstances of like upsets or like just, just like, no, I couldn't believe you had just the right amount of rules to beat me in this game. And the feeling like you can play it quickly and you can play it a lot of times and get through it. So you're not like beholden to this, like, oh, I just spent like 30 minutes and I just lost the game and this just sucks, right? So, but then that being said, there is a lot of cons where you can get in those circumstances that we talked about of, I don't really have many options left, or it kind of feels like I don't have a lot of options to play and there's not a lot of strategy. So it's not something that you really get held to wanting to play over and over to get like different strategies or different things out of the game. It's like you kind of see it all as you played it a few times. So that's why I give it a 7. And weight wise, I will say a 1.79.
1.79. Okay. So before we reveal the weight on the Board Game Geek
This is
page,
the game I'm gonna win a copy.
well, yeah, you get to win a copy of this game, which actually I do need to say was very, very affordable, very cheap. It's probably like around $10, which is like,
Yeah.
one of those good price points for a game, like on the lower end. Maybe it's up to 15, like between 10 and 15 is my guess. And so that's a good price for the game. But my rating is, like I said, I was going to change my rating again. I kept it to what I changed it to just before we started this. But the rating I give it is a 6.5.
You gave it a lower rating than
Lower
I
rating.
did.
I was
Rare.
so actually I think before we started this, like probably when I rated it years ago and like I saw it before we did this, I think I had it at 7. And then I changed it to 6.5. And then just now I was like, should I change it to 6 before John Scissors rating?
Ooh, a 6, even lower.
But then I mean the reason why I didn't is because I realized I had given Dominion a 6. And I would play this before wanting to play Dominion. just slightly. Obviously different style of game, different length and such, but I think this small kind of game might usually appeal to me more, to easily teach to people. And so that's why I do stand by wanting to play it a little more than Dominion. But then also it's at like 6.5, which is also what I gave, I think, Strike, which is a very not thinking but surprisingly entertaining game. And so it's like, okay, yeah, maybe
you don't
it's
give
around
Strike enough credit.
maybe it's around Strike territory of like how much I would want to play it, right? Play Strike, very quick, entertaining game, or play this like interesting puzzly quick game. And so yeah, so that's ultimately why I gave it a 6.5. I think according to the Board Game Geek scale, 6 is like will play if in the mood, and 7 is usually willing to play, where then at least based on that isn't necessarily how we have to do our number scale, but at least based on that, in this case, yeah, it is a little more than just waiting for my mood to want to play it. I do find myself over the years introducing this game to a lot of people as kind of that small quick filler game for the night. And so yeah, so 6.5 from me. And so going over to Board Game Geek and looking at the weight.
What did I say? 1.79 or 1.7?
Yeah, you said 1.79. And so the weight is
9 or 8. Whatever.
1.7.
Oh, I was actually close.
Yeah, you're getting there.
Dang.
Yeah, no, that's good. You're pretty close.
Dang it. Well, it's okay. I don't want a copy of this. I'm honing for a game that really matters. When we do, well, I already have Spirit Island, but when we do something else that I really want.
And so then according to Board Game Geek too, it has it says 5 to 30 minutes to play. So that's
Probably
a big
closer to.
big range for a small game like this. So I guess I would stand by what I said in the beginning of 15 minutes is a good amount to estimate for it. But yeah, 1.7 weight and then average rating of 6.9. So also between both of our scores.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that is Red 7. If you guys found this interesting, I hope you get to try out the game. It is definitely different in the kind of brain puzzle that it is, and I think that is kind of after playing it, after getting it at the store and trying it for the first time, like that's what appealed to me about it, how different it felt in this kind of tactical puzzle. And so yeah, if this was interesting to you, I hope you'll get to try it. And if this video was helpful for you, I hope you'll share it with your friends, family, people you play board games with. Hope you'll consider subscribing to this channel, following us on Instagram at I Got Board Game. And until next time, we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.